right, good morning, everybody. Let's make sure it's going live. My name is Samantha Mirabal with Melco's application team, and today is our Design Shop Talk, where we try to get together once a week to answer any questions you might have. I didn't get a whole lot of questions sent in, so I'll try to talk slow for the few I got, and anything from there, feel free to type in. Remember, you can always email applications@melco.com, and they will, we can put them there or comment on these posts. They kind of announce them usually on Wednesday or Thursday before the Friday, so it gets scheduled. You can type in any questions there, and we'll look at them. Oh, thank you for asking. My kids are much better. All of them ran through Flu A in rapid fashion, so they're back at school and much better. So thank you. All right, I saw it. Okay, so questions for the day. We'll start off with, and these are the two, I only got two sent in the groups when I posted, so type more in. And good morning, everyone. All right, so the two questions I got was, is there a way to resize a previously digitized file without messing it up, going smaller or larger? And then also, can you explain pull compensation? All right, so the resizing, it's when you're working with expanded files, you've got to be careful to some degree, because the expanded files are just it's what you get that has been previously digitized in DST form, EXP, whatnot. It's just coordinates of where each stitch is going to go, and it has trim information, color change, like that. But there's no math behind it saying, this is a shape and here are the properties of the wireframe shape to define how your stitches form. And because that's not there, when you scale, you have to be careful, because you're going to push all the stitches closer together or spread them further apart, depending on what direction you go. Kind of a rule of thumb that you should try to stick to is scaling no more than plus or minus. I think people say 10 to 30, up to as high as 30%. Personally, I don't like to do anything more than about 20%. But to scale it, let's see. If I go I save this off as an expanded file. All right, so this is all expanded. There's no wireframe information saved in here anymore that I can modify, right? So because of that, when I go to scale, it's just going to move, the stitches closer together, further apart. The software will compensate for it some to add stitches, but it's just a good idea to stay, plus or minus 20%. So how do you scale by percentage? Well, first you select your object. All right, so if I want to scale the whole design, I can click on the entire design over my project view here. And then down here where there's a W and an H, it's my favorite way to do it, is to click on one of those. How do you delete a custom color palette? I don't know. I think you could delete it from the, I'll look. All right. Oh, so when we go to scale, if you click on the W or the H, it brings up the exact same box. And from here, you can tell it how much larger or smaller you want it to go. So if you want it 20% smaller, well, it's all relative to 100, so that means I want it 80% of the current width. And it will scale it down. And you notice my stitch count did change. So it is changing that somewhat. Same if you want to go 120% taller. So that'll be 20% taller. Okay, so that's how you'd scale. Up larger or smaller. You can do that, again, clicking on the W or the H. You can right-click and go to scale. And you have those same things here by percentage. And this expanded stitch processing is where it's reprocessing the stitches to add additional stitches as needed. Okay. All right, so that's, where else is there? So you've got the percentage. You can go to properties, scale, that's there. How to punch two items so there is no overlap. That's in the digitizing, but we'll go over that. Okay, so that's scaling your object. So the next question I had was, what about pull compensation? Can you explain it? So if you've ever had a design that's, let's say this is what you digitized, a circle with a border, and when you went to go sew it out, you had this. And you notice there's gaps between there, and you'll look at the file and say, well, my file was perfect. My file was like this, but my sew out is here. What's going on? Well, when embroidery sewing, naturally is going to pull on the material that it's sewing through. Because to me, it makes sense. If you're, the needle goes through the fabric, and when it comes back, you have thread pulling, and in the direction it's sewing, that hole that the thread's pulling through is going to try to move in the direction you're sewing. So if I'm sewing this way, all these stitches that as I'm going across are going to be trying to move to the right. Then when I go this way, they're all going to be trying to move to the left. So as you go back and forth, you end up pulling the fabric, pulling everything tighter, so you get some shrinkage in embroidery. So to compensate for that, we have pull compensation. So there's two different ways you can do it. If I go into properties and go under pull comp, you have pull comp by percent and by offset. So pull by percent it deals with multiplication, and offset is just an adder. So what does that really mean? Well, if you look at different shapes you have, and remember it's going to be in the direction that you're sewing. So if I take this triangle and I come over to my pull compensation, I say, okay, well, instead of sewing on the wireframe, I want to compensate for the fact that it's going to shrink. So I want to sew past that wireframe. So as it pulls together, it ends up being where I actually want it. Well, I can do, let's say I do 130%. I'm doing it excessive just so you can see. Well, that's by percent. So that's doing multiplication. So what it's looking at is, well, first off, notice, does that look much like a triangle anymore? Not really, right? And why is that? Well, it's because it's taking the length from one side to the other, and it's saying, okay, that's really small there, but I'm going to overstitch it by 30%. Well, by the time you get down here, my stitch length is longer, right? So when it's doing a overstitching, because it's doing of a longer number from one side of the wireframe to the other, you get this. So when you're doing pull by percent, you can sometimes introduce distortions into your designs. Okay, so rather than that, if I leave this at 100, and let's do offset. So offset is additive, all right? So you're just telling it how much further to overstitch, to go past, so that the stitches are further out, so when you deal with that shrinkage, it still will look there. So right here, you'll see this is my wireframe. Well, if I put this to 10, just to be excessive, I wouldn't recommend using a pull offset of 10, just so you can see it easily. Notice here's my wireframe. It's overstitching by that amount. Okay, so it's really just additive. You're telling it how much bolder, how much wider, however you want to think of it, to make your shape. So on text, a lot of times, you'll type your text out on the screen, it'll look great, you go to sew it, and it looks kind of thin. Well, by adding some pull offset to that, you can make it look bolder, so that it deals with that shrinkage and keeps it clean. Now, that's not to don't forget, you still have to have good underlay. You still have to hoop well, use appropriate stabilizers. You can't just say pull comp fixes everything. Well, there's still the basics that you have to get right. But, you can take something that's hooped well, that you have good underlay, and then make it great by having some compensation and making sure it's all set up right. So I hope that helps with pull compensation. Okay, so there was a question that seemed to go away. It was, looks like Scott put the answer on it. Oh, now it's gone all together. Oh, there we are. Okay. Oh, I missed some questions. Is there a way to print accelerator keys? I actually don't know. I'll have to get back to you on that, or we'll type back in. I've never tried it. It's another question that was typed in: when creating a jump stitch, how to implement it to take place if a cut. I don't quite know what that means. So you don't want to have a trim, you just want to have jump stitches? Is that what you're wanting? So to do a knot and then do a jump stitch and avoid a trim? I guess I'm not quite sure about the question there. Oh, how to punch two items so there's no overlap. Well, I mean, there's a whole bunch of different ways to do it. It's really depending on what art you want. So if I have, let's say I want that circle sewn over there. Okay, so you want to leave jump stitches? All right, I'll come back to that. So let's say I've got this shape and I want to delete what's overlapped, right? So one thing you can do is let's select the shape you want to subtract from. I'm then going to hold my control key and select this one. And then up here you have combine elements or subtract elements. I can say subtract elements, and now I've got this shape and that shape. See that? So now they're separate, and I don't have that triangle, that part of the square underneath the circle anymore. Okay, now that is line to line, so you do need to compensate for that somehow, because as we talked about pull compensation, it's going to shrink a little bit, and you'll end up with, you have the potential to end up with gaps there, but if you're going to cover it with a satin, or you can add pull comp to each object, etc. Okay, so there's that. If you're talking about well, I mean, it really is just a matter of deleting the stitches. Show how to manually put a tie stitch without using the auto tie. Okay, so select manual stitch input method. All right, so what that is, manual stitch, depending on what you like to use, you might do a little Z or a different form. If you're wondering if you look at the knots that come with the software, they can give you an idea of what tie-off stitches are. So down here under the tie-in and tie-offs, you can say show tie types. And you'll see there's 5 styles, and this kind of gives you a visual of what they are. So if rather than using those, you would want to create your own. So let's say you don't want this X. So that one draws like a straight X, but you want to make it a little more compact into a Z. Well, you can go into manual stitches here, and I don't have my grid or anything useful here I'd need to know the size. Oops, that's text, not manual. There we go. Cancel. There we go. So you would program it, just digitize in what you want, and then when you start your next element, it would start there. Now I have knots enabled by default, so I'd have to turn that off if I'm going to be doing this. Okay, so I can program my own little knots in there. Okay, and then my next element would start with my walk or whatever I want to go digitize it. Okay. All right, can I go over the alignment keys? Sure. Oh, there was one question that jumped by, which how do I insert a jump? So to avoid trims, wherever something ends, over here you have your walk input method. From there, there's a drop down for insert jumps. Okay. So you can tell it to input jump. Your first click will be needle penetration. You can do another one, and there's your jump stitch. So that actually programs in your jump for you. All right. It doesn't show up in 3D. If I turn it off of 3D, you'll see the dotted line. So that's under walk. Change the type to jump, and then first needle penetration is your first stitch, your second needle penetration is your second click, and it does a jump between there. How to use the align. So let's say I want these 2 items. Let's say I want that aligned to the bottom. So if I select both of these, up here I've got my align top, align bottom. I can say align bottom, and I'll line them up along the bottom. There's a question, I'm trying to read it, sorry. My Adobe Acrobat has been upgraded. Why doesn't Adobe open files for Melco after it's launched? It all goes to... I don't know. What are you looking for? The old PDF sheets that show the lettering, or are you looking in version 9? Because that doesn't exist in version 10. So it used to be when you clicked on the code sheets, it would bring you to a PDF form that had all sorts of info. They don't have that for version 10 now. Is that what you're asking about? I'm not quite sure there. Okay, so back to the alignments. Well, I'll wait to see. So that's line bottom. You can also center align or, overlap them, whatever you want by using those. So they're pretty straightforward to use. You just need to make sure you're selecting whatever elements you want. Okay. Oh, version 9. I've never seen that issue, so we'll have to, there should be, that PDF file should be in the folder that it's saved, that the software is installed in. I don't have that version on this computer, so I can't look for it for you. So we can try to find it and type it in for you. All right. What other questions were there? There was the jump stitch. There was one about a hoop and it went away. I can't see it anymore on my list. I only see the last 4 comments. So I apologize. It was something about a hoop. How do I add them? Okay. I don't know. It went away before I could see it. I apologize. All right. So those are your alignments. We talked about pull compensation, scaling. The shapes, I use these a lot. If you haven't seen them, you should play with them some. They're fun. So you can always, if you're drawing any shape, just keep in mind you have different ways to input. You can just click on your screen using your left clicks and right clicks and create whatever shape you're trying to. Or you can, again, say that, select circle, and it will draw a circle for you. If you hold the shift, it locks it to be a perfect circle rather than an oval. You also can do squares. So those are just quick ways to quickly draw in different shapes. All right. What other questions do we have? And I apologize, I can't see any others, so I'm just looking at the last 4. Oh, many people have been asking how to put new hoops in the Melco software. Okay. Object, where is it? Tools, hoop setup. You can go and create your own by adding a hoop. Hi, Bruce. So, whatever it is you're trying to create. Test. I'm just going to call it test because I'm just going to make a mess. All right. So once you create a new hoop, you can go edit the hoop shape. Ah, there you go. So Scott just put in a link for you on how to do it, do hoop setup, but you would come in here to your edit hoop shape and type in all your points that define the shape. So whether it's going to be a circular, a custom shape, you know, you can come in and basically program in the entire shape for you. Once you have that, it'll stay in here and you can bring it in. Okay. Are you able to put a word over an existing digitized file and have it knock out the underlying stitches? Kind of. Yes, you can. Kind of. All right, let's see. Let's say I want to put text on top of this. So, Sam. Okay, so I'm going to put that there. And I don't want it to sew on top of the fill, right? So I'm just going to copy and paste it. I'm going to select this, and I just do that so I don't lose the original. So I'm going to select the shape I want to remove the stitches from, and then I'm going to select the lettering, and I'm going to say subtract elements. And if I turn off all the lettering, notice I have a hole now in my shape. Okay, so it removed all the lettering under there. It did it line to line. All right, so that's not necessarily a great thing because if I have any pull effects going on here, I might get a gap there. So at that point, you might want to change it a little bit, which I can select that hole and go to operations, offset outline, and let's say do a -7 point offset. And now I've got a slight overlap between my font. See that? Between the hole. So I can modify it so that it doesn't quite do line to line, and I've got a little bit of an overlap, but I still remove that. Okay. What other questions? So again, how I did that was I just selected whatever shape, well, whatever text you have, right? And I can delete the duplicate I made of that other one. So select your text, the shape you want to subtract it from. I don't know if I can do all 3. I don't think I can. I think you have to do them one at a time. Yeah, you have to do them one at a time. So I subtracted it from there. Now I can select this one, the blue box and the text, and then do the same thing, subtract elements. And now if I turn off all that text, you'll see I've got the holes put in it. Okay. Can you go over the corner tool with a single line center elements? Occasionally I'll try to cap the corner and it doesn't work, even if my corners are more than 90 degrees. Yeah, so single line center. All right. So if I have a single line center and I have a sharp corner on there, the corners, it's just a way to help avoid having all those needle penetrations going into one spot, right? So if I went to actually sew this, it wouldn't look like this nice crisp corner because I'm putting, 30 little stitches in one spot. Well, instead, if I go over to there, I can go into the corners and enable the different types of corners. And it does depend on the angle, right? So there's angles here that if it's bigger than that, I don't believe it works. I think that's how this goes. I always have to remind myself, sorry. So let's see if I change this to something big. So it's not capping it. It's still not capping it. But once I go below 45, it starts to cap it. All right, so if you'd have to mess with your angles on here. There's different types of corner stitches. So you have just a traditional cap or you have a miter. The miter is kind of fun. It's just a different look. So where you have the things overlapping. Okay. Let's see if I change that to 60. Get this closer to 60. Yeah. Okay. Really. I'll talk. I haven't seen that myself. I will talk to Scott and the guys and see if they know of a bug or if there's something that I'm unaware of, which is possible. I don't know at all. All right. I know if you're having trouble with it, you can always do them manually, and the corners is a level specific feature, so if that's something that your level doesn't have and you want to get a mitered look, what can you do? Or not mitered or even a capped look, what do you do? Well, you have to do it manually, essentially. There's a bunch of different ways you could do the same look, whether you do it as a complex and then just add different stitch directions. Right. That's what Scott just put. You can go into the stitch direction mode and move your stitch directions to force it to behave. Okay, so you can do different things along here to force the issue by moving your stitch directions around. Although I just messed it up, but anyway. What else? So there's another question that was typed in. I'm trying to digitize a line of dashes symbolizing a row with yellow dash strap. How should I do that? Would a bean stitch be the best? Is there a way to avoid all the trims? Well, depends on how far apart your dashes are going to be. So and how wide your dashes need to be. So if it's just going to be a running stitch, a bean stitch is not going to look like that. You would have to do breaks between it. But you could do like a set of six stitches, bean back and forth, and then do a running stitch across, so it'll be thinner, so you'll get that bold look followed by a thin look. So what am I trying to say there? So let's say I did, oh, that says a jump. I don't want it to be a jump. I want that to be a bean of, let's say, 5. So that's going to be a relatively thick line. Well, if I then did a regular walk after that, so not a bean and not a jump. I could do a jump, but just a normal. So that's going to be thinner than this line. So you can get an effect without having the trim by just doing your bean stitches with a running stitch between it. There are tricks you can play of burying stitches between things, but it's only if they're close enough does that really work, where you can do a jump, manual stitches and bury the stitch down into the fabric. But it's really dependent on how big you're trying to go. If you're doing satin stitches, I would just do it as a satin, and again, depending on the gap, just do a running stitch between there. The little dash that you see is going to be minimal compared to the width of the other stitches. Okay, so if you're doing them just as running, whenever you use a bean or even increasing your bean thickness, it's going to make the line pop a little bit more and look a little bolder. You can also make them look bolder with doing retraces and offset, but retrace of 5 is a bit excessive. If you're going to do a retrace, maybe like that. So that gives you 6 pieces of thread at each location. And the offset is just staggering the needle penetrations on the return trip so that the line again will look a little bolder. Okay. So, I mean, to directly answer your question, which would be best? I mean, it really depends on how big you're trying to make it. You know, you can go from satin stitches all the way down to just running stitches. Oh, how to put text around a circle without using the drop-down menu for arch or other options. I don't know. I've never tried that. I always use the drop-downs. I can do that, but that's still using drop-downs. So I can tell it to use block of arc, type the text, and then I can come over here and adjust it without having to change the size. So I can just move it around by using the handles. I don't know. I don't have all the accelerator keys memorized. I'm sure there's one, but I don't know it. Let's see. Let's go find it. Tools, accelerator editor. Let's see, arc text. Is there an arc one? No, I don't see it. Oh well. I don't know. Sorry, Chip. Oh yeah, you can also do the dashed lines as a decorative stitch. No. So is there a way to do multiple lines of variable data and group names? No, there's not. So I saw that question. I think it was sent in and looked around trying to find workarounds, and you know, the group names works for one line of text on there. So the question, it's really like, let's say you want a name and then first place, another name, second place, those sorts of things. Well, you can't have a group name for all the names and a group name for all the places. It will only let you do one line of data for the group names. Okay. Yeah, so Barbie, you look at that decorative stitch that they did on Wednesday that Scott and Nate did. You can easily do that as a decorative as well. Okay, what other questions? Any others? I apologize if I missed any. I can only see literally 4 posts while it's live, so. And I'm on myself, so sorry. Any other questions? All right. I guess that's it. So remember, again, my name's Samantha. We're doing this again next week. Be sure to type in any questions. I'll check back later, see if there's others that were typed in here, see if we can get them answered. I know there was at least one that I didn't know this answer off the top of my head. About the drop downs without using those to put text in an arc. So I'll ask Scott and the guys about that, and we'll figure it out. Sending your questions, applications@melco.com. Type them in on the threads. Any of that. So have a wonderful day. Happy February. I hope this was helpful, and I will see you next time. Bye.